Thank you for tuning in to Roll Call. The movie you selected is 6 Degrees of Separation, starring Will Smith.
Hey everyone, welcome to Roll Call, the show where two childless millennials gush over movies and follow an actor's journey from their early years throughout their blockbuster hit.
Because, let's face it, in this hellscape, we're just chasing the power trip that you felt when you got to pick out a movie for the weekend. The simple things in life.
The simple things in life. And you know what, Bria? I can't wait to get our Sidney Poitier on in this episode.
Are we talking about Nancy Reagan again? Or
Yeah.
Throatus of the world. What's up, everybody? I'm Bria. And I don't want any part of this conspiracy. I mean, family? Wait, is family a conspiracy?
Oh, doodle 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 doo now 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 now. I had a very interesting conversation. Hey everyone, I'm Simone, by the way. I appreciate the 1993 skepticism of making a movie adaptation about cats because, let me tell you, we should have taken notes back then before we lost ourselves in the black closed vortex hole that is the cat's butthole that we're all trapped in and we can't get out of.
Yes. And shout out to the Ukraine, because that just shows even more how much of a butthole we're in.
We're stuck in a tainty, swampy butt, and it's not been fun this week.
So if you don't know, I mean, you should know because the intro tells you. I mean, you selected this episode. You should know by now. In today's episode, we're going to talk about Will Smith in the 1993 film 6 Degrees of Separation. So, let's take a trip back. So much was happening. I feel like 93 is like a hidden gem of pop culture. Like, just chef's kiss. Like, I might want to go back there. So, let's get some sad stuff out of the way. Lisa Bonet and Lenny Kravitz split in 1993. And now that we know what has come of that relationship, the beauty that is Zoe Kravitz slaying it again as Catwoman and all kinds of just like, oh man, to live the life of a Bonet Kravitz Momoa person, like I wish, like, to be born into that family. Oh
Yeah.
how does it feel to be God's favorite? But
You know that you were like wrapped up as an angelic baby in the most like coziest loose knit scarf, like, you know, like instead of a baby blanket, they were probably like Lenny probably like took his really long scarf and was like, I'm gonna wrap my baby in this.
I mean, there's just so much magic.
There you
Also,
go.
I'm, like,
Third time's
half
the
a
charm.
bottle of wine into this. There's just so much magic about the Kravitz Bonet Momoa family that just mystifies me. Sadly, Jason Momoa and Lisa Bonet are no longer together. They're splitting up this year, 2022, but man, I mean, I can't wait to see what comes of their kids together. But yeah, in other breakup news, we have Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder.
Oh,
Why
Winona
No
Forever.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's one almost similar to like Angelina Jolie. He's got a Winona tattoo.
Yes, he does. It says wino now, but
Yeah.
we all know what it once said. So,
Sure do.
who are you fooling, Johnny? But man, such an interesting couple. I didn't know a lot about this couple until Hello Teffy on TikTok, word to her, did a series on them. But they too, like our Bennifer, were a couple of the tabloids and the media, and too much media scrutiny kind of made them take separate journeys in life after this. But what an iconic 90s couple. On TV, we have the premieres and the start of iconic shows like The X-Files, Frasier, The Nanny, which I watched Frasier during the pandemic, and I started The Nanny again, but I haven't finished. But We love Fran Fine, and her outfits are just like the epitome of like 90s fashion.
Yep.
Just mini skirt
gives me
amazingness.
shivers. The leopard print, the teased hair.
The
everything
tights
was great.
The Moschino.
The big earrings.
Yes.
Chunky jewelry.
And then on the black side of things, happy Black History Month, black shows like Martin, The Fresh Prince, Living Single, as we talked about last episode, and Hanging Mr. Cooper were in full swing. They did not premiere in 93, but you know, we gotta get our grapes where we can pluck them from the vine. And a cultural classic, A Different World, was ending, which is a spin-off of The Cosby Show, if you don't know, where Denise, Lisa Bonet's character, went to college, and then that show wound up carrying on without her. But such an important point in African American pop culture, because that show showed HBCU, a historically black college experience, and it encouraged a lot of black youths to go to college and showed them what that would look like in a very positive, enlightened way. So props to that show for doing that. Simone, I think you'll really like this. The first ever Got Milk commercial.
Oh, okay. Can I guess who it was? Because it's always a celebrity, right?
I actually don't think this one was a celebrity. I read what it was about, but I don't think it was a celebrity. I think it was just kind of random. Okay, so it's different from like the Got Milk ads that we would see with the iconic like white milk stashes in the magazines. Okay. All right. Yeah, oh man, now I want to relook up what this commercial was. I kind of thought about putting in a link to see like what it was about. Okay, what was the first Got Milk commercial? It featured a hapless historian played by Sean Whalen receiving a call to answer a radio station's $10,000 trivia question, voiced by Rob Paulsen, who shot Alexander Hamilton in that famous duel, referring to the Burr-Hamilton duel. So it was kind of educational, I guess. But as you stated, you know, it led to many iconic Got Milk commercials, like the one we watched where the guy's in like the full body cast and he can't dip the cookie. Oh, yeah. He just has like a cookie shoved in his mouth. That lives in my head rent free. And so now we have some notable moments in hip hop. Actually, this year, our topic of discussion, Will Smith, aka The Fresh Prince, and DJ Jazzy Jeff dropped their album Code Red. This wasn't like a huge album for them. Their next album, I think, would do better because of the song Summertime. But, you know, notable. And I can't wait to listen to his music and talk about that. Some notable songs of 93, Whoop, There It Is. Whoop, there it is. Which in 2021 became, that's how you know you're getting older. It's like when songs of your youth become like advertisement songs. And so that was like an ice cream commercial song. Scoop, there it is. Oh, no. You didn't see that one? I don't remember that one. But I know the like sentiment that you mean of like, there were those memes after the Super Bowl commercial of like, oh, like as a kid, I always remembered my parents freaking out about the acts of the Super Bowl this year. And then I realized that it hit me that like, I am the target audience. I'm the target audience. Yeah. So Whoop, There It Is. Great song, great party anthem. Now a commercial jingle. I Get Around by Tupac. I had to throw that in because I feel like that's just like a staple. Some notable albums that came out was Midnight Marauders by the Tribe Called Quest, which I love Tribe Called Quest. Wu-Tang Clan, 36 Chambers, classic hip hop album. Love that album. Puts me in my like New York, like, especially when I wear Timberlands, like, just hits different. Diggable Planets, a little different, a little jazzy, but their album, A New Refutation of Time and Space, came out. Some popular songs from some lady rappers. Queen Latifah, also a rapper slash actor slash singer. UNITY, which was like it's just an amazing female rap song. Salt and Peppa's album Very Strictly Necessary came out, which features the song What a Man, which like
what a man, what a man, what a man.
What a man,
yeah.
What a man. Yes.
Man.
Some notable R&B songs of 93. Can We Talk by Tevin Campbell. I interchange.
I got it.
Some notable 93 songs. Can We Talk by Tevin Campbell. Knockin' the Boots by H-Town, which, made a whole new slang term for sex, which is knocking the boots. Another sad love song by Toni Braxton, one of my faves. And then, of course, like you mentioned last episode, Janet Jackson was just killing it in 93. She's on the cover of Rolling Stone, the infamous, this picture right here. Yes. Which I have on my closet door, of her with her husband holding her breasts and just, and she topped the charts in December of 93, so it's relevant. I'm not just bringing this up because I'm a Janet fan, but it's relevant. And her song Again for Poetic Justice, which was nominated for an Oscar, was #1 in December. And then the rest of the top 100 songs were All That She Wants by Ace of Base. Is a little baby.
Here's another baby. But yeah, I have to bite my tongue so hard when we do this because every song I just want to sing.
And then we have Hero by Mariah Carey, who was again. So after Hero, we have number 4. I do anything for love, but I won't do that by Meatloaf.
I can do anything for love, but I won't do that.
Yes. And then we have Shoop by Salt and Peppa. Shoop. All right. Well, I also thought that to try to figure out how to include Black pop culture a bit in this for Will Smith, that I talk about the covers of Ebony and Jet for whatever time we're talking about, which are Black magazines. And so the cover of Ebony for December 1993 was none other than Mr. Michael Jordan himself. At this point, I believe he retired for the first time from basketball. So that makes complete sense. And then Jet magazine has multiple issues throughout December. So we have a cover with Denzel Washington for the Pelican Brief, which totally makes sense. Whoopi Goldberg for Sister Act 2. And then Michael Jackson, which talks about his alleged addiction to painkillers and then the charges that were coming against him in 93, which also happened, I believe 93 is the year he performed at the Super Bowl. So very interesting cover stories. Yes. In the box office, overall that year, Jurassic Park was killing it. Came in, was the highest grossing movie of all time until your favorite came in later and knocked it off its throne, Titanic. But 93 Jurassic Park was smashing, as Nigel Thornberry would say. And then December of 93, the movies that came out with 6 degrees of separation. 6 degrees of separation. Wayne's World 2. Yeah.
I mean, I know they did. Obviously, I've seen both of them, but for some reason, I feel like 93 would have been too early for a sequel. So I thought 93 was like when the first one came out. But so that's why I had the surprised.
They were like, let's get this money, baby.
Okay.
Same with Sister Act 2. So we've got 2 sequels back to back. The Pelican Brief, hence Denzel's cover issue of Jet magazine, which stars him and Julia Roberts. I've never seen The Pelican Brief, but very notable movie, it seems like. Philadelphia, also Denzel Washington, but Tom Hanks. Also, I believe that's his first Oscar movie.
Okay.
Before Forrest Gump. And then we have another notable Oscar movie, Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And there were more movies in December of 93, but these were the ones I felt like were recognizable and notable. So
those are some strong contenders.
Yes. So, in contention of box office glory, how did 6 Degrees of Separation do?
Well, Bria, I got those numbers for you. So this movie was released, like Bria said, in December 1993. This was released by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Films, directed by Fred Schepisi, or Schepisi, I think is how you say it. I had to listen to like a couple of other people saying it out loud, but I think it's Schepisi. This is based off of the 1990 play of the same name, 6 Degrees of Separation, written by John Guare, and was originally released on Broadway. It actually was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize winner as a play at the time. The tagline for this movie is, "For Paul, every person is a new door to a new world." Its budget was $12 million estimated. But opening weekend, Bria, only grossed a mere $53,000.
Wow, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, and gross worldwide only banked all together at about 6.5 million estimated.
Damn.
I was pretty surprised by these numbers myself. 22 mil, I mean, for a movie that's it was all filmed in Manhattan. They kept the filming, even the scenes when they were in the Sistine Chapel or whatever, that was just a set, obviously, but everything was filmed in Albany, New York, or in Manhattan. And I'm guessing that the most of the money is going to the cast for the film, which we'll talk about, because there were not a lot of big chasing scenes or cars or explosions or things that might tend to eat up on budget. So, yeah.
I feel like such a name recognizable movie, that's super surprising to me. But sometimes the crowds and the fans aren't on the side of history. Sometimes things come out and then it's after the fact that we're wow, that was great, or that was a moment in pop culture and all that stuff. Well, I'm curious what our man Lil Raj in the house of Lil Raj has to say about this. If you don't know, that is Roger Ebert himself.
Bria, remember before we started recording when I said I have a bomb to drop and tell you? So kind of along the lines of how shocked you and I both were when we first heard about these budget numbers, or the total gross of this film, Roger Ebert did not review this.
Really?
There is no official Roger Ebert review for 6 Degrees of Separation, which in the history, at least of this show, I've never come across a movie that has not been reviewed yet.
Besides Nurses on the Line, but yeah.
But that had something, didn't it?
Did it? I mean, it was a TV movie, so I thought it didn't. But you reviewed Made in America.
Yeah. He reviewed Made in America. He reviewed My Family.
I find a lot of this very surprising, because 6 Degrees of Separation was adapted from a play that was very notable in New York. And the fact that the movie adaptation of that didn't have box office success. And apparently Roger Ebert was just too busy to even review it. It's kind of astonishing to me, but okay.
He's sorry, I'm watching Gilbert Grape right now. I can't. So actually,
Wayne's World is calling me.
Waits World is calling. So I just fact checked. He did not do a review of Nurses on the Line. So that was the last time. But because we combined Nurses on the Line with my family, we still had some like gumption and stuff to talk about. So Brea, what I have for you today is just an article written for, there's a New York Times article, but that just talks more about plot. But the kind of main review I'm going to be reading is from Variety. This was written by Leonard Clady. This was released on November 30th, 1993. The connection between any two people in the world, so we are told, in 6 Degrees of Separation, is no further than half a dozen human associations away. Pauper or king and anywhere in between can be traced via no more than 6 intermediary sources. The trick, of course, is to find the right kind. Now, if you want, Brea, I can combine just the overall summary with a little bit of the review and just do a twofer for this one.
Roll into it, baby.
All right, let's go for it. So, as I mentioned earlier, this movie is based off of a play of the same name. This play was on Broadway for a while. This was the first movie adaptation. I don't know about you, Brea, but for me, it's like when I watched this very much still read and felt like I was watching a play that was cut. And it's really hard when you're making movie adaptations of a play for it to not feel like a play anymore and put you more in that like cinema realm. Can be really tricky. But 6 Degrees of Separation means the connection between any two people, so we are told, is in 6 degrees of intermediary sources. Scientific sociology aside, the screen version of John Guare's award-winning stage hit is an elaborate mousetrap where getting caught can be a delightful fun. But in the central scam dissipates into self-analysis and moralization. The more serious it becomes, the more of a pedestrian path it takes, and the tug of war between rational and absurd draws no victor. That won't matter to the sophisticated viewer, but poses serious commercial limitations for this classy entertainment. The overall overview of this movie, if you will, is New Yorkers Louisa Kitteridge and John Flanders, Flan Kitteridge, are upper-class private art dealers, pretentious but compassionate. Their prized possession is a double-sided Kandinsky. The one side represents control, the other chaos. They relay a story to their friends and acquaintances that becomes legendary over time. Their encounter with a young black stranger who came stumbling upon their front door one evening as they were courting Jeffrey Miller, an important investor who would make them wealthy beyond their dreams. The young man, Paul Poitier, had just arrived at the city when he was mugged outside the building. He sported a minor knife wound to the abdomen. He was a friend of the Kitteridge's children, so he says, who are attending Harvard. But more importantly, he's the son of actor and director Sidney Poitier. Tomorrow, Paul is meeting up with his father, who is in town directing a movie adaptation of Cats. Beyond the attraction of taking Paul into getting them roles in the movie, Louisa, Flan, and Jeffrey all end up being captivated by Paul's charm, charisma, pedigree, and eloquence. After tending to his wounds, the Kitteridges invite him to stay the night. Their encounter with him ends up being an all too familiar story that leads them on a search for him after he leaves their house the next morning. And that search, Louisa particularly starts to critically study their lives and how much compassion they actually have. Is Paul Poitier really who he says he is? You will just have to watch this clusterfuck of a movie.
Clusterfuck. So, I'm curious, like, how many pumps of butter you would give 6 Degrees of Separation?
For the cast and the, like, artsy interpretation, I would give this 2.5. I feel like acting-wise, the performances were phenomenal. I could have seen them do equally successful if this was a film or if they were just on stage. I feel like we're not going to see something like this kind of role or interpretation of a role from Will until much later, because his next several roles are going to be more comedic or action or just
Yeah.
more along the lines of that like Fresh Prince style of acting that we tend to see. So for him to have so early of a switch in mindset and character this early on in his career, I feel like is kind of going to be a nice little break. So for that, that's what that like half
Half.
star comes from. What about you?
I would give this 2.5 as well. I think the half for me is more so that I feel like this is probably like a notable movie and performance for these actors, and I think it's just age wise that maybe it's just not like what it was at the time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like after I like while I was watching it, I had a lot of like, okay, like I might need to watch this twice, and then like very much so, I feel like I need to read about like what this movie is supposed to be about, and like the
Yeah. Well, it was inspired by, and I'm getting this from Wikipedia, but it was inspired by the real life story of someone named David Hampton
hmm
and his like retelling of this like whole like whoop-de-doo gotcha con artist story.
yeah, and I was just at the end of it, I was just, and we'll get into this, but I was just like, very puzzled. So I was like, I feel like this is a little above my head in some ways,
Mm.
and in a very like early 90s, like tapering off from the 80s kind of way of like, it's crazy to, and I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's crazy to watch movies where you see people, riddling off like, Shakespeare or, these
Catcher in the
notable,
Rye.
yeah, these notable authors and books and art and stuff like that. And that kind of high class society. And that doesn't really exist anymore. Like, you can be very rich, but you could have absolutely no idea who Kudinski is, like, or, so that era
Oh yeah.
of yuppie culture
Yes.
or Upper East Side, like New York culture or whatever you want to call it, wherever you're from. But like that era of like, I can quote poems by, so and so, or talk about art and
Yes.
plays and composers and stuff like that. Like, rich people don't really do that anymore. So,
Yeah, it was a very like idealized way of how this like image of how people believed that wealthy people acted. And I mean, I think to some degree a lot of that has some validity when you think about like historically, if you were in upper class society, you were rubbing elbows with the quote unquote celebrities of the time, but the celebrities might not necessarily would have been like artist or Hollywood, but it was about like the steel mill people, like old money
so
versus
like
new money,
Rockefeller, right?
Rockefeller,
Yeah, okay.
Guggenheim, all those people that if you were wealthy, that's what made you a celebrity. And then living in that high class society, like they valued this,
Pip pip cheerio, like type
yeah,
of culture. And
yeah, this idea of like I have to be the smartest person in the room kind of
yeah.
thing. And just because you can quote Catcher in the Rye or quote Shakespeare doesn't necessarily make you a good fucking person.
Yes, in many ways. So I feel like, this movie is very settled into the 93 of it all, and kind of I feel like it's very 80s in a lot of ways.
Mm,
But I feel like, yeah, for this time and whatnot, like I understand why it's a pretty well-known notable film, and again, the cast of it all and all that kind of stuff, like I get it, but I do think that it's aged itself a bit at this
mm-hmm,
point in time.
mm-hmm.
um so yeah, 2.5 for me. And so I think we should get into the movie and the cast and all that stuff.
Let's do it.
The cast is pretty star-studded in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about Will Smith. This is his first like kind of big, serious film role.
He was, I think, second billed next to Stockard Channing in this one.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, like before Donald Sutherland.
Wow. But yeah, so Will Smith, and then you have Stockard Channing, who plays Lisa, which is like a riff off of Louisa.
Yeah, I said Louisa, but that just helps me pronounce her name by putting the L beforehand.
Yeah.
So please, I'm sorry.
It's very
Lisa.
like, it's very bougie to be like, oh, it's
Louisa.
my friends, it's Lisa. But Stockard Channing, who I know and love as Rizzo from Grease, and I'm sure most people do. I also know and love her as the brief character in First Wives Club. And this has actually kind of made me interested in her career because for someone kind of semi-iconic, I would say, she hasn't had the most successful movie career. And then we have Mr. Donald Sutherland, Kifa's daddy.
Ain't you with Kifa?
For Teen Mom fans out there. But yeah, Donald Sutherland, kind of ahead of, another family that ventured of nepotism.
Totally.
Just as is what's his face? Martin Sheen and such. And is he in Succession? I feel like he is, but this reminded me. Yeah, his character reminded me of the show Succession, which I kind of just started. But I mean, he was in Hunger Games as of not too long ago and stuff like that. So, I mean, just actor's actor. And we have Sir Ian McKellen, Gandalf himself, all kinds of other notable roles. But he plays a friend of this couple named Jeffrey. And then we have some interesting kind of not even cameos really, but smaller roles because they're not as central to the plot. But Anthony Michael Hall, who we all know from Brat Pack Glory, from, Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Weird Science, you name it.
Also in Edward Scissorhands, and speaking of Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp.
Yes, he plays Trent, who is who winds up being Paul's kind of lover and like his kind of gateway to this Upper East Side society. We have a young Heather Graham.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Like what a moment to see her. And then we have J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
Which I still don't know exactly who he was in this, but like reading about it.
He was the son of the doctor who was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Do you know why mom divorced you? Because she said it was like having sex with a salad without the dressing." That was him.
Oh my God. Okay. Yes. So J.J. Abrams is in this fucking movie. And I also noticed, what's his name? I think it's Oz Perkins who plays Woody. But I noticed him because he's like that kind of weird guy in Legally Blonde.
Yeah. He kind of plays the quiet nerd in a lot of movies. I think he was in Dude, Where's My Car? There's also Anthony Rapp, who for our Broadway or fans out there, he like wrote and produced Rent. And was also in the movie adaptation of Rent, but starred in Rent in Broadway for a long time. He's kind of like, I don't know, the Lin-Manuel Miranda of the 90s, I like to say.
I mean, even Richard Masur, Dr. Fine, who played the doctor to J.J. Abrams'
he was in a
son.
bunch of shit.
Yeah, he looks really familiar. Just a silver bearded daddy, sort of, at least on IMDb right now. But he was in My Girl, Risky Business, all kinds of stuff. But a pretty really solid cast, I feel like. So do you want to talk about some of these performances from these actors and characters?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Well, I just want to say that I learned that Stockard Channing originated Wisa on Broadway or whatever in New York in the play format. And so she did that in New York and in London at one point. And it was a point of contention that if this was ever made into a movie, that she reprised that role. So, I mean, kudos to her for being able to, like, start it off and kind of end it in a way of, like, putting it on film so that, you know, everybody could see it forever if they wanted to. And then, and I didn't know either, too. That's why I'm really kind of interested in her career, that, like, she had more success in theater than in movies. So the fact that she started off in this play version and then did the film, like, isn't really a surprise. But also, she got nominated for an Oscar for her portrayal.
And a Golden Globe.
Yes, and a Golden Globe for her portrayal as Wisa in 6 Degrees. But yeah, anything else about Stockard Channing?
I thought she was just so fabulous. I mean, she's like that yuppie bitch that you kind of love to. It's kind of like watching a Real Housewives, you know? Like, they're so ridiculous that it's like, oh my God. I know. And it's just like, you watch someone like that and you're like, how? You're such a hot mess. Like, what is happening here? But, like, you know, just how she managed that character. I read that too, that she also had done that character on stage and reprised it for the movie. But I think that kind of helped make it feel like she just did that character so naturally that it felt like, oh my God, she's not pretending to be a character. Like, she's pretending to be someone who, like, we exists, like, that like total stereotype of what we were saying in earlier about, like, what a fucking, like, yup that actually exists out there, and name drops artists and you know, rubbing elbows with rich people and stuff, and just, like, gushing and lushing over knowing people in the who's who and having hands in every honeypot. So I just adored her so much. I thought that this character was really great.
Yeah. It was interesting. I found a Charlie Rose interview of her and Donald Sutherland kind of around this time, talking about these roles. And it was interesting to hear her, like, talk about this role, reprising it, the success of it, and all that kind of stuff. And she seemed pretty humble to me about, like, the success of 6 Degrees and, you know, the recognition she was getting for this role, because she's, you know, they're like, oh, you know, this is, you know, really doing well. You think this is going to change, like, you know, upturn in your career or something? And she's like, hey, I don't know. You know, everything's kind of a cycle, and, like, when you're at the end of the cycle, you kind of don't know what, like, you know, the next one's gonna look like. But, you know, I can only do what I do, and that's that. But I don't know, I walked away from this, like, I love Rizzo and Grease, but I walked away from this, like, very intrigued about Stockard herself. And then Donald Sutherland's Charlie Rose interview was very interesting as well. He talked a lot about the relationship between actor and director, and kind of this, you know, kind of a release and sexual kind of thing that acting does for him. And I don't want to say that like that's weird, but just the way he chose to describe it was like this, you know, build up and this, you know, trying to please the director and less so the audience, of I'm trying to give the director what he sees in his vision. And then, you know, if the audience likes it or not, that's really on kind of the director, because that's his vision. So I'm just trying to deliver what I can. But the excitement or the high price of it all, really, that's what he loves about acting. And, you know, him foreseeing that he would do this for the rest of his life and stuff like that. I thought his portrayal as Flan, which I thought was an interesting name, but and to Wisa, I think these names are very like Upper East Side, like, oh, just call me Wisa, or just call me Flan instead of Flanders. I I thought it was really spot on and interesting. And I don't know, I feel like they were both just kind of made to play these characters in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see this as a real stretch for them, but again, I don't know like the trajectory of their career. I know they've done tons of other stuff, but like, they just seem to like really understand the assignment for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would agree with what you said, that this character seemed similar to what I said about Stockard, is that it just felt natural. And I don't want that to sound like a dig or a dish or anything about them, but just these characters are almost like stereotypical characters that you might see in like this like over the top way of acting with my drink in my hand and talking about this story about this crazy incident we had the other night, and that we had a visitor into our home. Don't you like? It's almost
slit our throats.
It could have slit our throats. We could have been murdered.
It's kind of very like Clue-ish.
That's what I said in my notes, Bria. Watching this movie really reminded me of watching the movie version of Clue starring Tim Curry, and that movie's so fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I watched this and was like, this is very comical in the way that Clue is comical, because the characters are like, these like very over the top actors.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a lot of like kind of like improv characters that you would see in SNL, that I don't know. So Donald Sutherland, especially in the like you said in Hunger Games, like the last kind of thing that we'd seen him in movie wise has been this like asshole villain. And so he's like still kind of an asshole in this movie. Yeah. He's a bougie little asshole, but kind of like a fool, like a dumbass.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was great.
Oh, and I learned that Donald Sutherland was not like the first choice or anything. Michael Douglas actually was,
I can see that,
possibly going to be in this role, and I guess he turned it down or whatever. But this was a role that Donald Sutherland did not like necessarily gravitate towards. He had to read it a couple times and kind of be like, oh, okay, maybe. Like, and in his Charlie Rose interview, he kind of talks a good amount about, coming into agreeing to play a role and, feeling it out, and that sort of relationship between like reading a script and deciding you want to do something and understanding the character and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was interesting. Sir Ian McKellen. He plays Jeffrey, a South African businessman, very wealthy, who, this couple wants $2 million from. And, I mean, Ian McKellen is just,
he's fabulous.
Yes.
Always. I mean, his role is kind of small in the way that it actually didn't. He was part of the plot when Will Smith's character Paul walks in and meets Weeza and Flan. And Weeza and Flan were kind of like wining and dining him before taking him out to dinner to like seal a deal on this $2 million art dealership business deal.
Painting.
And that's when Paul's character enters in, and Paul also ends up charming Jeffrey, especially once they all know, like, or think that Paul is really the son of Sidney Poitier, and he talks about, oh, maybe we can have you in our film, and if I tell the right people. And then the next morning, Jeffrey calls back and tells Weeza and Flan, like, all right, I'm in. And additionally, like, let's have like a Black Film Festival. And he starts like pulling all of these like people of the time. And it felt very like a white expository of like the Black experience.
So great right now. And
totally.
Sydney will be a judge.
We're gonna again like write on the backs of these people, and like we're the ones who's gonna reap the benefits, which is like very politically and socially commentary, which definitely the play in this movie has those like overlays of. But Ian McKellen's character doesn't really like progress too much in the intertwinedness of the plot as it later goes through. But it would have been fun to see more of him because he's just so damn cute.
Yeah. And then just kind of as a grouping, the kids and Heather Graham, who is a part of a couple that Paul also kind of dupes. I just thought they were pretty like standard, nothing too standoutish. I did think that a lot of their dialogue was like kind of crazy, absurd.
Like the pink shirt?
Yes.
If I may, Bria? If I may.
I feel like this is going to be your Geely of Will Smith.
This is it. Well, this was originally going to be my opening line, but Bria, you gave him my pink shirt? You gave a complete stranger my pink shirt? That shirt was a Christmas present from you. I treasured that shirt. I love that shirt. My collar has grown a full size from weightlifting. You saw that my arms had grown, and you saw that my neck had grown, and you bought me that shirt for my new body. I love that shirt. My first shirt for my new body, and you gave that shirt away? Can't believe you. I hate this life, and I hate you.
Yeah, stuff like that. Where, they tell their kids, they're trying to figure out, like, do you know this Paul? Like, who is he? Maybe, like, he was a former classmate of yours. Like, there has to be a reason why he knows so much about you enough to convince us that you knew him. And their reactions just ran the gamut, but were just so over the top that, like, that's where, for me, like, this movie kind of not went left, but I was just like in a corkscrew on a roller coaster, just like, oh wait,
yeah.
Like, this
to me it read very much like these very privileged teens are trying to like turn against and go in this like counterculture of what their parents raised them in, and this is their way of rebelling. Like J.J. Abrams' character as Doug is in his like college dorm at Harvard. He has a pot plant growing behind him. He has like a Marley poster or like some kind of like rise up or rise against poster in his room, and he's like cursing and screaming at his dad. Weeza and Flan's kids, that's not the son. No, one of the sons was the pink shirt.
Yeah.
And then the other two were just like, man, you guys are being so annoying. Oh my gosh, Mom, I'm going to go like off to Afghanistan. I'm going to get married. And her mom's like, okay, bye. Like, I need to I'm talking with Paul right now. Leave me alone. So the kids in this movie were like both with their parents and against their parents. But yeah, it was very much, I don't know, a lot of it felt like I'm going to reap the benefits of the monetary like pocket or the monetary benefits that you're like stuffing into my pocket right now and like putting me through school. But man, I'm going to be like a rebel, and I'm going to like go against your will and do what I want to do.
Which is like my opening line, which is her daughter. It's like, I will not be a part of this conspiracy. And Flan is like, it's not a conspiracy, it's a family. And it's just like, it's family, a conspiracy. It kind of too shows the dichotomy of like what the parents are dealing with, and like the kids being like, nah, like I don't want to be a part of your like shenanigans. Like, I'm trying to figure myself out, and they're like, we're a family, damn it. Like, you need to be helpful and a part of this. But yeah, okay, so that's the cast for the most part. Any other notable performances, or I think there were some cameos by some of the original cast members from the play. I read about it. I don't have notes on them offhand, sorry, but just know that the play people were semi a part of this. And let's get into Mr. Willard Smith II.
Let's do it.
Paul Potier. For me, my overall notes, I have like 3 points. Were, considering his acting on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, this is a smart role to take. in order to show potential range and to garner future consideration for more serious opportunities. And then kind of similar to Jennifer Lopez early in her career, it's just super smart to be amongst some really notable actors like Stockard Channing and Donald Sutherland and Ian McKellen and even Anthony Michael Hall and J.J. Abrams and Heather Graham. But this cast is pretty solid. It's not like random ass, like, I don't know, half these people kind of cast. And then I did find that his character kind of, I don't think it was like a huge stretch character-wise because he's very charming and I don't find that much different from Will himself. Because Will is very much a people pleaser and, wants to put on the best face or front forward that he can for the public. But the opportunities to take the character a bit further, like him being homosexual or him having been on the streets and not from this life and, kind of, I don't know, making up this con of sorts. Like, they seemed very surface level, they seemed very afterthoughts to me at least. Like, so, the flashbacks with him and Anthony Michael Hall, I feel like he seemed more street savvy in Where the Day Takes You than in this movie. And I feel like that should have carried over well, I feel like in Where the Day Takes You, I had no questions that, like, oh, that's Will Smith playing a homeless dude. I was like, no, that's Will Smith as a homeless dude, And this one, I feel like I didn't quite believe that he was, like, this street kid who, like, came up on a way to kind of con these rich people out of kindness, really, because he didn't really take much from them. But, yeah. So, I think it's... Obviously, I think it paid off in his career, but surprisingly, I don't think it's, like, that big of a, like, oh my God, like...
No, I agree, too. I don't feel like it's a stretch, considering that we're going to see similar dramatic roles or even, like, more heartfelt, like, gut-wrenching stuff later on. But this movie definitely feels, in addition to his character, so far, I mean, if we're just comparing it against like Fresh Prince, Made in America, and Where the Day Takes You, is so far anything that Will has done. And so trajectory wise, if you're thinking about his film career, people may not even have known that he was in Made in America or may not have even watched Where the Day Takes You, right? And they just know him from Fresh Prince. And so they see someone from Fresh Prince acting the way that he is in 6 Degrees, that it might make the moviegoer go like, huh, that's interesting. Yeah. It's not necessarily a stretch, but it's definitely very different, and it goes against what a lot of people might have like pigeonholed it or expected of him to be. For him to like maintain pretty much this Paul Portier persona throughout the rest of the movie and not feel like he has to like code switch too much, or like, now I'm gonna go back to like streetwise Will and like talk a little bit different and be a little bit more like funny and charismatic. But that it's interesting because his humor, charisma, sexual attractiveness, flirtation is still there, but it's executed in like in a much different way. And I know that his kiss with Michael C. Hall is not a real kiss. It's done with like camera tricks to make their faces look like they were kissing, and they added in a song or a sound of a kiss. And Will supposedly, this is like the IMDb fact, but Will supposedly got that advice from Denzel Washington when he took this role, and he had said like, you might not want to kiss a man on a screen because that might like damage your career, or it might typecast you, or you might not land more roles. And Will took that advice and he kind of like refused to do the actual kissing, but later on, like, really regretted it. He's like, I feel like I should have been able to do that and, like, have the, I don't know if you want to call it courage, but just, like,
Yeah.
to feel safe in myself at that point in my time to be able to, like, go through with something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think hindsight, like, we can all agree with his newfound, like, you know what, maybe I should have did that. Like, maybe I should have more courage, or I should just, you know, been more mature enough to be like, I'm not gay. I'm playing a character and this is true to him and I can do this and it not reflect on me. But I think in the 90s of it all, like when you think back, you know, we weren't as progressive as we are now. We weren't as open as we are now.
Absolutely.
And, you know, AIDS was at its height. So even to this day, Will, you know, faces rumors of him being homosexual. So, I mean, it helped him in some ways, but like he still didn't really escape that criticism in other ways.
Yeah.
So,
And that's something that I learned after watching this and doing research, because there aren't a lot of, or not really any interviews that I could find one-on-one. Interviews around this time more have to do with like his music and Fresh Prince. And so I can see the like still very present homophobia of the 1990s to be like, I'm like scared to like take on this kind of role because I don't want someone to like think of me like this. And the hesitation to want to tackle a role like that.
The 90s. We love them, but like, you know, they're not perfect either.
No.
On that note, I do want to talk about, because when you do look up Will Smith, 6 Degrees of Separation, you see a lot of, because of his memoir, him talking about his venture into method acting for this role and how much he committed himself to being Paul Potier, that at the time his new wife Cherie, you know, she had married Will Smith, but at that time, because he was so into character, that, you know, she agreed to marry Will, not Paul Potier. And then at some point that he was so in love and infatuated with Stockard Channing.
Yeah, I read that too.
Of the character. And then he realized, he was like, yeah, method acting, not for me. I can't do it. Not going to be happening again. Which I thought was interesting because you rarely hear that side of method acting. I feel like you usually hear, like, you know, the Joaquin Phoenixes, the Daniel Day-Lewises, the Jared Letos, who are like super like, oh, they lived as these characters and they got really, the Heath Ledgers really into it, and, you know, it kind of messed with them or something. But you never hear people who are like, yeah, I tried that shit and no, I can't do that. Like, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting for him to talk about that.
Totally. I read similar interviews and also like watched some like YouTube channels and stuff talk about it, that hit in his preparation for this role, that he tried to be so immersed in his character that he kind of like really started falling for Stockard. Like, of course, like YouTube channels and tabloids and stuff will twist the words of like, Will Smith falls in love with his co-star, blah, blah, blah. And they might like twist the words around a little bit. But I think that that's something really to be noted, that like, that not a lot of people do talk about, of this is why method acting isn't for me, because it takes me out of my own reality, and it crosses this strange boundary that I'm sure so many actors and actresses struggle with, about falling in love or being hateful towards someone. I mean, I understand why they pay them the big bucks and all that, but it's like, I can't, as someone who like is already so empathetic and sensitive, that I feel like my own problem is that I'm constantly soaking up the emotions of other people, that I can't imagine to do that professionally.
Right? I mean, thinking about that made me think about, like, you know, to care about things outside of you a lot of time. we don't think about how much that takes of each other to like actually give each other, even if it's like happy, if it's sad, if it's just like, just to be like, oh my God, congrats. Like, to care about someone enough to be like, I'm going to take enough of my energy to be like, I'm excited for you, even though this has absolutely no effect on me whatsoever. But I love you enough to be excited about this. Like, we don't think about that a lot, I feel like. So, and I don't know how I got here, but
Well, it's this idea of like energy matching, right?
yeah,
And like you and as actors having to like match the energy of the characters that they're
right,
emulating
okay, yes.
and trying to bring.
Yeah, which goes back to, so one thing about Stockard Channing and Donald Sutherland is because Stockard played this character on Broadway. During her Charlie Rose interview, a lot of it was about like, oh, how is it different from, you know, doing it on Broadway, or did that help you, or, you know, did that hinder you? And she said that, you know, she kind of had to start like fresh, and it felt like a new marriage of sorts, because with Donald Sutherland, he didn't see the play, he didn't know anything that pre-existed, so he's starting from this new foundation. And for her, having already have this past with this body of work, she had to get rid of that and start new with him, and then meet him where he was at, and, you know, figure that out. And I thought that was really interesting, because that's kind of rare to have an actress play a character prior and then kind of reprise or continue that character, but with someone new and in this larger, bigger format. But yeah, like the energy of it all is just like so much.
Yeah.
So risk wise, I mean, we kind of said that we didn't, I mean, I think this was risky for Will. I don't want to downplay like him playing, for one, he kind of played a Carlton.
Yeah, totally.
You know, he's pretending to be this Harvard student, this well-educated student. He talks about this thesis and The Catcher in the Rye and all this stuff. He is very preppy looking, you know, when he comes in. He's not, you know, as hip hop as he is on Fresh Prince or just in life at that time. But I don't want to downplay that it was a stretch for him at that time, but knowing where he winds up, I think, you know, you're like, you know, that was nice. Like, that was a great effort for him at the time. But I think knowing his potential and what comes later, you're like, this is like the tip of the iceberg. So
yeah. So it's interesting you say that. I kind of had some reflection after I watched this, and then I thought more about it this morning. And maybe it's because with Jennifer Lopez, I had known, you know, 90s and mid-aughts rom-coms. I knew enough. I knew Boy Next Door. I knew Selena, obviously. But the like fillers and shit in between were a new venture for me, especially the music. And I know for Will Smith, the music piece is also going to be a new venture for me, at least in the early years. But because I definitely have like Will Smith cassettes and CDs from the 90s, or owned them at one point, or Leah Bad Bitch Gold Pink Razor had them. So that's my like 6 degrees of that. Anyways, but there was a lot kind of going into it with Jennifer Lopez that I watched for the first time. Now, Will Smith, I'm not saying that I've seen every single movie, but I've seen a good majority of the movies that we're going to be watching this season. And it almost feels like a mini spoiler alert of like the potential that's to come. And so when I watched this movie, I dare I say, Bria, felt a little reminiscent of Steve Soderbergh's Out of Sight in terms of like performances for Jennifer being this like early role before the rom-coms. This is like in between Money Train and Meet in Manhattan that we're just like, okay, Jennifer, and that a lot of people, movie critics especially, really kind of like always refer they always refer back to it. And I watched a couple other YouTube channels talking about just this movie in particular, and one of them was called Rabbit Hole Media, which, you know, goes with our show, the IMDb rabbit hole, baby. And that channel had said, like, this is a sleeper hold movie of Will Smith that a lot of people tend to forget but shouldn't, because of this like nuanced character that we're not necessarily going to see in later performances.
Yeah, I really equate this with U-Turn because
yes, okay.
I feel like
the quirkiness.
Like I feel like we really enjoyed Out of Sight. It held up well. You know, it's a movie I will gladly rewatch and tell people about. And I feel like U-Turn and 6 Degrees are movies that I'm like, these are really interesting roles for these actors to have taken on.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very interesting ways of storytelling, but they're not necessarily the most relatable still, or they don't hold up quite as much. Like, there's something there for sure, but it's like not quite like where like, oh,
yeah,
like it's not like a Selena, or, you know, where it's like, oh man, like you understand why this person went on to do what they did. Like, and I mean, and not to say that, yeah, you do in this movie, like you understand why Will Smith went on to do what he was able to accomplish outside of the Fresh Prince, especially in terms of like this character being so different. But at the same time, it's just like, this could have easily been like career kryptonite for him in some ways, where like like Denzel Washington warned him, like, hey, I don't know if you want to be kissing a dude in the films right now. Might not be the best move long term in 93.
Yeah.
Now someone would be rewarded for that. But
yeah.
1993, it was like, especially black media. Be like, I don't know about that Will Smith. Kissed that white dude in that movie. Like, Fresh Prince. Fresh Prince. And I just did like the wrist hand movement.
That's why I think, though, that this character or this movie was a bit of a risk. I think it was a smart risk that he took because, you know, having play along the likes of some very well-established people of both stage and film was cool, and playing something that was just a little bit different, I think offered viewers a range that we hadn't seen yet. And I don't think, I mean, we know that this movie didn't like gross very high. I'm not necessarily sure why, compared maybe against to like Gilbert Grape or some of the other things that were being released that year, or that's December, January can also sometimes be like the Oscar buzz month when like the big production movies come out.
Stockard got a nominee for, so
yes, absolutely. And that surprises me. So for someone who, maybe it's because I'm thinking in 1993 money that like 53 mil opening weekend, but 6.5 mil estimated for total growth seems low. Probably because movies nowadays like Avengers will gross like several hundred million, close to $1 billion of box office growth and hits.
Yeah.
So that also kind of puzzles me with Stockard at least getting both Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination. You would think that maybe more people would know of this movie, but apparently this is like one of, I guess it makes sense when you think about like Bad Boys, Men in Black, Wild Wild West, Hitch, 7 Pounds, and later for Will Smith, Pursuit of Happiness, right? Like, he will get his Oscar moments, but for now, that this is kind of like the early buzz of like, he had potential back then.
Yeah. I think, too, that this movie probably didn't do that well because, I mean, this year, the big huge movie was Jurassic Park. So
I mean,
when I think like I said earlier, like this movie is very like on the tail ends of the 80s, like yuppie culture and, this like bourgeois sensibility. I feel like too, because it was a play, like it's going to interest certain people, but not everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure certain people were like, oh my God, they made that hit Broadway play, a movie. Let's go see it. But certain people were probably like, yeah, let's go see Wayne's World 2, like, or Sister Act 2. Like, so, or like, Will Smith's in that. Nah, let's go see Whoopi, like, and Lauryn Hill. Like, so, I mean, the success of the movie, it surprised me, but I also feel like I kind of understand it. But at the same time, I think the critical acclaim of the movie makes sense. It's one of those darlings of like, this was a play adapted to a movie, and there's these outstanding performances, and it has, these great monologues. That's too a part about Will Smith's character that I feel like was one of the best parts of showing him growing as an actor, is like he has these crazy long-winded conversations with these characters, trying to sell himself to them as Paul Potier, as this, Harvard student who lost his thesis in a mugging, talking about The Catcher in the Rye or his ideas on life and whatnot. And that's hard. Like, he wasn't monologuing on The Fresh Prince. He wasn't monologuing in Made in America or Where the Day
Yeah.
You. So, like,
Agreed.
that,
A lot of monologuing.
yeah, that part of this movie, I think, is exceptional in terms of, like, his ability and growth. And even Stockard Channing, says, like, he worked really hard. So, I wasn't that surprised or, like, that bewildered, like, of him being able to pull this off. But yeah, like, I feel like I have to watch this movie again. Like, it's just one of those movies that, like, you watch and you're like, huh, I don't quite get it, but, like, maybe another time. Like,
I wonder too if a lot of that's just with the film adaptation of making a play into a movie, and if this would make more sense if you just watched it with like a one room view of a stage of the people telling their story, and then it like transitions back and forward in time.
Yeah.
But I think some of that unfortunately gets lost with the film piece. Like there were a lot of like fever dreams when Weeza and Flan would kind of go into their like monologues and talking about being duped and what art means to them, or I had the strangest dream about cats, and like, Louisa's completely like, she's sitting on a bed just like surrounded by cats, and she's not making this connection that like people are gonna be playing cats in the Cats movie. She's just like, they're training real cats to be in the Cats movie. So that piece, like, there's some really kind of strange, bizarre elements. But Bria, ever since you said U-turn, that's actually a better analogy. When I made the comparison with like Out of Sight versus this, it was just more along the lines of like
career,
pivotal,
like highlights. Yeah.
Yes, and I don't think this is going to be referred a lot back to, which is unfortunate. Although I don't know, I haven't read all of the Lil Raj reviews yet, but every time, almost like 90% of the time we would read a review with Jennifer Lopez, they would always fucking talk about Out of Sight.
All the way up until Hustlers is like,
yes,
ever since her pivotal turn in Out of Sight.
Even in the like article, the People magazine article with Marry Me.
Oh yeah.
It's like all the way up to the top.
We can't let J-Lo go, so if that's going to be a problem, we need to tune out. She's going to be our point of reference because it's our first season, so I think even like 10 seasons into this. I do want to point out some like great, interesting quotes from this movie that I thought were interesting. So there's a quote. I tried to pull these and remember who said for what. Rich people can do something. Oh, I think Weezer said this. Rich people can do something for you, even if you're not sure what it is you want them to do. And I was like, bet. Rich people have power. Like, they have power, they have connections. And even if it's the smallest thing for someone who's not in their position, it could very well change their life or the trajectory of, their day to day or whatever it is you want to talk about. But, I found that profound. And then, of course, the iconic quote about, 6 degrees of separation, which only went to live on to 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. But Lisa is talking to her daughter, and they're kind of going about this whole situation and whatnot. But, she's like, I read somewhere that everybody on this planet is separated by only 6 other people. 6 degrees of separation between us and everyone else on this planet. The President of the United States, a gondolier in Venice, just fill in the names. I find it extremely comforting that we're so close. I also find it like Chinese water torture that we're so close because you have to find the right 6 people to make the right connection. I am bound, you are bound to everyone on this planet by a trail of 6 people. And I know about 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but hearing this in this movie, I was just like, damn, that's kind of deep. And the part that stood out for me was really like finding the right 6 people to make the right connection.
Yeah, that really messed with my mind a little bit. So I want to hear why that stuck out to you first.
Well, it stuck out to me because I feel like whenever you may have ambition or goals or, that people are always like, oh, well, why don't you try this? Or why don't, today I saw a tweet that was like, Black people, if you don't want to be a director or writer or whatever, we still need representation in film in other areas like set dressing or location scouting and stuff like that, stuff that doesn't get as hyped as being a director or a writer or something like that. And so I was looking through those tweets and people are like, yeah, we do need representation in that, but you have to know people to be able to find those jobs. And it's not a career tract that's easily identifiable. Oh, okay, I just have to go to this school and do this and then get an internship doing this and do this. It's very much a who you know type of thing. And I feel like that in a lot of ways of even things I'm interested in, it's who you know really more so than sometimes even what you're capable of.
Honestly, that's exactly what I was thinking too. It's that part when she said, it's just you have to find the right 6 people. And I felt like that was a little bit of a commentary on that privilege piece and prejudice piece of you can find someone that you're connected with another other people, but do you want to be associated with them? Yes or no? If not, find someone else that you're going to be connected with. And it's more so about the preferred 6 people that you would like to have within your social circle of who you're connected with. And I kind of relate that back to when Will Smith's character Paul reveals at this dinner party that he crashed with Lisa, Flan, and Jeffrey that he's Sidney Poitier's son and kind of distant son, and not very well explained or not well known of son.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't until he mentioned that he was a kid of someone famous that they were oh, that's what got them so excited. And then obviously this potential of being in the Cats movie, because later,
the irony of that.
the fucking irony of that. So that later that day, Lisa and Flan go to a wedding of a family friend, and they regale the group or whoever will listen of this crazy event that happened the night before. And then they go out to lunch a couple days later with some friends, and then their friends are we have a crazy story to tell you. And it's the same exact thing that happened to them when they start to connect these pieces, that Paul is maybe not Paul after all, and he's a con artist. And so but anyways, it's like just finding the right people just really kind of got me back to this whole political and social commentary of people wanting to only be associated with the people that they think are going to advance them in society or somehow do better by them.
Yeah, which also goes to like the quote, and I didn't save this quote, but it's a quote about like imagination and how that's really the gateway to reality. And to some degree, if you think about it, we're all kind of faking it and trying to be what we think is acceptable or admirable or, cool in the simplest terms of it. And I think that Paul has determined a way to fit in with these people who have the things that he wants. And he's again just faking the funk to this is what you want to hear. You want to hear that I'm Harvard educated and that I know your kids and that I have this thesis and I'm really smart and I know about The Catcher in the Rye and I know about this and that I'm Sidney Poitier's son. But like, I have this estranged relationship with my dad because I think that there's always like this twist. Look at their kids, where they're like, like you gave away my pink shirt. Like, there's always this twist of like, yes, I'm from this, but like, oh, like I have endured too. Rich people can't be happy with being rich and like well off. Like they also have problems. I don't want to like ignore their problems, but I do think a lot of their problems are like in vain of like, oh, I have so much. Like I need like something to bring me down from this in some ways. But also too, I think like you said, he didn't become like kind of notable to them until he was like this famous person's child, which goes with the quote that I saved towards the end of the movie where he's calling and they've gone to the police and whatnot and they're trying to like, find him and catch him. But he calls them and eventually he's like, I'll be treated with care if you take me to the police. If they don't know you're special, they kill you. And then Lisa says, oh, I don't think they kill you. And then Paul says, Mrs. Lisa Kitteridge, I am black. And then Lisa says, I will deliver you to them with kindness and affection. And then eventually you see this montage where the police are arresting him and they pull up and they're like, oh no, like we have to go with him. We said we'd go with him and stuff. But I feel like that's so poignant still because given all that we've endured with Black Lives Matter and even before that, just this idea of that, if you're black in America and with police that, first off, they see you as a threat versus like a person. And it's not until that you've gotten some humanity. And it's weird because I believe that today is the anniversary of Trayvon Martin's death. So it's like very full circle. But like, until someone has humanized you, it's just like, oh, well, the police shot this thug or this criminal. And it's like, nah, this kid was 13 and he was minding his business. Or, this man was doing this and minding his business. Or, yeah, he might have been doing this, but at the same time, do they need to shoot him to get him to, comply or, not be a threat? So, him having to reinstate, like, if they don't know you're special, they'll kill you. Like, I was, like, when I was watching that, I was like, oh! Brought me back from like the kind of weirdness of this movie.
Absolutely. And I wondered what the word special meant, if it meant like privileged and wealthy, or if it also meant someone with mental disabilities and mental illnesses. Because in Paul's earlier monologue, when he talks about Catcher in the Rye and he talks about schizophrenia and he talks about wanting to be, that's this whole like what's the line between creativity and madness and things like that. And when he calls Weeza back on the phone, he says his last name. He's like, oh, I'm Paul Poitier Kitteridge. Like, almost as though he, like, wants to be within this family, or he can't now, like, discern between who he originally was and who his new character and persona is. And so that also made me, left me going, huh, what did he mean when he said special?
I think, at least for me, that I think he means that, like, someone cares about you. Like, just from a personal standpoint, like, being black and being in certain situations, in simple situations, like, even in a store where you're shopping and you're getting more attention because people are like, oh, keep an eye on that person. It's like, that is derived off of just how you're perceived, right? Versus, like, hold on, wait, that person is a person and they might just be, like, here just browsing or looking for a gift or whatever, not shoplifting. And I think that sometimes when you're in a mindset, whether that's your own mindset or you're just programmed in some ways to look at people in that way, that you don't take a second and think, like, oh, hey, that person's a person. Just like this white lady's a person. And I'm not like, hey, do you need help finding something? But I'm sweating this black person, or I'm sweating this, like, Mexican person or something like that. So that's what it meant to me. But I think your point's valid too. Like, I didn't connect the, mental health, schizophrenic, especially in terms of, it's one thing to be a con person, but it's another thing to be a con person and not be able to be like, baby, it's a con. Like, I'm not Paul Poitier. Like,
yeah, the fact that he never, like, fully gave himself up and switched into a persona that wasn't Paul Poitier, that's kind of what made me go, oh, maybe there's a glimpse of mental illness somewhere in there.
Yeah. Which, too, I mean, even mental illness in terms of, like, police, like, isn't really taken into consideration that much either. Like, when they think that you're a threat, they're not like, oh, hey, this person's mentally unstable. Like, we need to approach this differently sometimes. Sometimes they're just like, we need to get this person under control by any means necessary. So they're not answering, shoot them. And that's not always the answer, which is, like, the result of, like, recently Black Lives Matter and people being like, we need to defund the police to redivert funds towards people who understand mental health and is able to address people who have those issues in a way that will de-escalate versus, like, just shoot them. So, yeah, that's what I thought of that. Another quote that I liked, that I was like, oh, me too, girl. That's a little lighter, was, I am a collage of unaccounted for brushstrokes. I am all random. And I was like, girl, I'm random too. Fuck yeah. So those were moments in the movie that I was like, yes, like, or like, oh, wow, this is deep. Any other notes about the plot or characters or?
Oh, I have a line of after Paul makes Weeza and Flan and Jeffrey, like, a dinner from scratch because they missed their dinner reservations once Paul came in. And he's like, oh, let me cook for you. I know my way around the kitchen. He, like, cooks them some kind of, like, fish, tuna, nice little meal with, like, a nice wine and all of that. Jeffrey leaves and Flan is kind of, like, seeing him on his way out, and it's just Weeza and Paul. And she's like, oh, dear, like, I'll clean up. And he's like, oh, no, I know the help doesn't come until, like, Tuesday, so you're going to be collecting, like, bugs or whatever until then. Which basically means to say, like, if no one picked up those fucking plates, they would have just been sitting there for several days, which is also so fucking mind-boggling. But anyways, he's like, no, it's fine. Like, he's like, I'll wash, you watch. I get a thrill out of being looked at. And he kind of, like, yanks the salad bowl from Louise's hands and kind of has this, like, little smirk. And I was like, ooh, you little flirt. I loved that.
Yeah, which I think plays into the point of him being in like her dreams and him calling her. They have this connection.
They had a very interesting connection, yeah. And like when he was being dressed for his wounds, she's obviously just like looking at him when he takes off his shirt and stuff, and he just kind of
Yeah, which is like still a very young, gangly kind of Will Smith, not a
yeah.
like not a I Am Legend Will Smith or Bad Boys 2 like chiseled Will Smith. Another part that I thought was interesting that we haven't really talked about because it's not too central, but was like Heather Graham's character and her boyfriend
Oh
also
yeah.
being duped by Paul, which at that point he changes his story to that Flan is his dad and is
Mhm.
disowning him as his like half-breed child, and he's trying to get money from him and all this stuff, and so he winds up staying with them, and then eventually he winds up kind of, I guess, charming his way into sleeping with the boyfriend. And these
Yeah.
are like very like Midwest kids who moved to New York
They're from
trying to,
Utah. They're kind of
yeah.
like, yeah,
Not even Midwest, but yeah, Utah kids who are very green in New York and
very
trying to
hippie.
like make their way in New York, and he kind of takes advantage of them and takes their money and stays with them and all this stuff. And I think that's another layer to his con that like you see that, he knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
but also like I feel like he knows no means to an end either. Like he has to keep it up. He can't drop any. It's like he's juggling. He can't drop a ball.
Again, goes back to that method acting, like not being able to lose the persona.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the very kind of like fish out of water experience of like being in a big city and like, well, didn't we come here to like experience stuff?
Experiment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just like, yeah, but at the same time, like, you slept with him and gave him our money. Like,
Hmm.
it's one thing for you to be like, hey, I had this experience sexually. It's another thing for you to be like, I had this experience and I gave him our savings. Like, no, that's
Hmm.
those two don't wash each other out. Do you think that this? Well, we didn't talk about the trailer. What did you think of the trailer? I thought it was pretty straightforward. Like,
See, I thought the trailer was a little misleading. I feel like if you didn't know, if you weren't familiar with the play, that you'd be like, what's this? But I feel like people who might be familiar with the play would be like, I know what I'm getting myself into. But after watching the movie and then going back and watching the trailer again, yes, it makes sense. But I feel like if you didn't know what the movie was going to be about, that you might be a little confused.
I mean, yes, I agree because I, for once, watched the trailer before I watched the movie, and I was like, oh, this should be interesting. And like watching the movie, I was like, this is interesting and also like very confusing, and I don't know what I watched, and I don't know what it means, or like
Hmm.
what are we trying to say with this movie? But I do think in terms of like giving away the plot or like what you feel like you're in for a movie, I feel like it's pretty like straightforward of like, oh, like, do you think this movie would hold its own in 2022?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think your point in the beginning of like this movie dates itself in a lot of ways. Um, but I don't think that in modern times. See, okay, story wise, people get catfished and conned all the fucking time. And it still even bothers or blows my mind when I know that like MTV's Catfish is still a fucking show and that people still get duped after seeing and knowing that that happens to other people,
Yeah.
which goes into like later years of the seasons. A lot of people like were doing it for the fame because they knew that they were going to be on MTV and it's the exposure of it. So I don't want to say that like con artistry is a lost art because clearly it still happens. Tindler Swindler baby, we just name dropped that.
Inventing Anna.
Inventing Anna, yeah, it still happens and it's still possible even with all of our modern adaptations. But I feel like this movie can classically live and stay in the 90s. I don't know if a movie in this nature can be remade in these modern times.
See, I think it can.
Okay.
I do think it dates itself, but I do think it's adaptable to modern times. I just think like you obviously have to do a bit more work in terms of the catfishing of it all because seeing whether Sidney Poitier has a son or not is like a Google away versus like a
True.
we need to find his autobiography
And
and
the
he has
whole
all daughters like
yes, and before that they had this whole montage of them calling the like public library or
oh
like public pieces of information to like get a hold of Sidney
or like
Poitier and his team.
acting agencies or something like that, like
Yes,
celebrity
yes.
agencies. Like we need to get into contact with Sidney Poitier. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, no. But I think this could still happen. I mean, even when you think of inventing Anna, like this was someone who claimed to be like this rich European heiress, very involved in the art world, which aligns with this movie, very involved with well off kids of people like
Mm.
this couple who, you know, believed that she was just as wealthy as she said she was, and for somehow, you know, they didn't. And I think too part of it is this that rich people a lot of the times I feel like they don't want to admit that they could be had.
Yeah.
So they're like less hesitant, whereas someone who has a little less or nothing will be like, hold up, wait, this sounds too good to be true. Like rich people
Mm-hmm.
are like, oh, I'm not being had.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. You
Yeah.
know, in whatever way. I don't think I portrayed that well, but you
No,
know,
I get it. There's like that level of pride to like
yeah.
actually admitting that you're at fault or that like you got duped.
Yeah, which really makes me think of Elizabeth Holmes and the huge scandal with her and like the Theranos blood machine and the
Mm-hmm.
Silicon Valley of it all because she had people like Richard Murdoch and these huge, really important, really rich investors, you know, giving her money and believing in this technology. And his grandson was like, "Hey, grandpa, this ain't what you think it is." And they was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, she would never lie to me and blah blah blah. And he passed away before, you know, now she's gone to trial and been found guilty, but he passed away before that. But you know, where you're just super in denial of just like, no, I know what I know and this is the real deal, and like,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to admit that like, hey, like I made a dumbass mistake in believing this person. So, in some ways, I think that it could hold up in a remake. I think this version of it doesn't. I think it holds up in some ways, like politically and social economically. Like the commentary is still pretty, like, I think poignant. But I think the culture has shifted a lot. So, a lot of those
Mm-hmm.
references don't quite land the same.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when I watch the Golden Girls and they talk about like certain people, and I'm like, I have no clue who that is, but that must be funny. Um, and I think that that's where this kind of gets lost a little bit in 2022. But as far as like con men and cons and rich people being out of touch
Mm.
and ignorant, I think it's still is pretty spot on.
Okay.
Um, if this movie was remade, what would you change? I mean, obviously the con has to be a little more well thought out.
The con
It has
has
to
to
be like very second acty, where you
yes,
have
where you
like
have to create your whole like Facebook profile, LinkedIn profile, fake your way into Harvard, to have your like fake records show up and you know have your cell phones be automatically directed to like your friends' phones who can pick
yeah.
up and be like, yes, I am this like letter of recommendation or like I am the dean of this college. Um, totally. Yeah, the technology wise would have to be a lot more on par, but um and the like bourgeoisie of it. Maybe it's not so much like art and old money, but it's this new money and new wave of like tech, yeah. New startup companies, right? Like big companies go viral and like someone, fucks over all of the CEOs of each company, right? Or like takes a little piece or ends up making out like a bandit because they have like stocks in those companies and then they pull the stocks right before the companies tank or whatever.
Yeah.
And we've talked about Ocean's 11 and that kind of franchise. Like, that's a con artist movie.
Yeah.
And it's told in a different way, but
Parker,
I could see it being told like that, where there's maybe a little bit more like mischievousness, and that it doesn't necessarily feel or read so much like a play. I'd like to if this was to be reimagined in modern times, I would like to see this feel more like a movie.
Yeah, I think like in the Ocean's 11 of it all, like you get more of the con side of it, like where you get more of Paul like practicing and working out like, his story and practicing like his isms and, things that he needs to know to be able to talk to these people. And even getting to see him con other people because he conned multiple people. It wasn't just this particular couple, and seeing him kind of in a montage of like saying the same shit to different people and it working, adds to the like, oh shit, like he did his research of it all. Obviously the con has to be tighter technology wise. I think it also has to be different. Kind of like Tindler Swindler, you can't be like some famous person's kid.
No,
like you would have to
your
be like
circumstances have to be different.
you have to be some obscure like tech person's kid or oil tycoon's kid or something like that. Someone maybe foreign, something that these people don't automatically know of, but will be like, oh, I've heard of that. Or
what about like a swindler story, not so much with elder people, but like trust fund babies, where like they don't know much about, but they're
that'd be more like Inventing Anna,
yeah, where they're taking advantage more of people
Of
their
the
own
kids,
age,
yeah.
of the kids, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's like more, I don't think that's more doable, but like I think that's more of now, Because I think to know the generation before you and trying to like bait them into stuff, you like really have to do like your due diligence with that versus your own generation and being like, I know what we think's impressive. Like, so I think it would be really interesting to see this remade. I know that it's gone back to play format in some regards in not too long ago recent history. I don't know about current, but like it's been revived. But it would be interesting to see it like revived in film and for modern day. But yeah, and on that note, do you have a movie cocktail spread for this?
Kinda. I feel like it's an easy one. I feel like for me it's going to be a really like bougie champagne and caviar kind of situation, or
Yeah.
like a fancy fish dish, like whatever Paul had prepared for them. I forget exactly what it is because they were just like listing ingredients that were in their cabinet, but
Yeah.
I feel like tuna was like something that was incorporated in there.
Yeah, I think it's very bougie, Upper East Side, like beef bourguignon or like
They
beef
were talking,
Wellington. Or...
yes, they were talking about some expensive like ravioli that was
Oh,
like
yeah.
$20 a little piece of, which is like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and then I will top your champagne with like a really bougie fine wine or something because Upper East Side people like are very much probably like they have their own personal sommeliers or a wine collection of some sort, which along with their art collection is like an investment. And like, oh, we just got this 92 chateau. Like, And
Yeah.
it's vintage. It's so good. Something of those lines. So yeah, nothing too far out or complicated. Any final thoughts?
I'm glad this was our third film because if it was later on, I might have been a little bit more confused as Will starts to really establish himself. But I feel like this was a great experimental film in his early years. And I know that this isn't the last time that we'll talk about this. I have a feeling that this is going to be something that we refer to throughout the season.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I don't know. I just have a feeling.
I think when it comes to like his more serious roles and when we get to like Oscar contender roles, I definitely see us coming back to this and being like, wow, look how he built upon that foundation. But like looking at his career right now, after this, we're talking about Bad Boys, which is
I know, it's such a change.
Yes, which I'm super excited about. I love that movie. So, but yeah, like, you know, I think this will be a movie that will kind of be in our back pockets in a sense, kind of like the U-turns and the even like My Families of J-Lo, where it's like, you know, she had these nuggets of like serious moments that get disregarded in her later more commercial successes. And I think that's kind of true of Will, where like he has this moment of, you know, really serious, real decent dialogue, standout cast.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, he's the Fresh Prince. Then he does movies like Bad Boys and, you know, Independence Day and Men in Black. And so you forget about like, oh shit, he kind of went there for a moment and then he kind of went the other way and then came back later. So
Yes.
so very interesting. So I think 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon and Will Smith. All right, everybody. So thank you for listening to this week's episode, and to the people who've stuck with us so far, please come back for another episode of the Safeway Select version of Inside the Actor Studio.
And seriously, if you like us enough to stick around, take another deep dive down this IMDb rabbit hole as we discuss Will Smith's early music presence in the late 80s and early 90s, including albums Rock the House and Code Red.
Well, you know, if you've got nothing better else to do, go figure out a theme to watch a bunch of movies you've never seen.
I'm your host, Simone, and please subscribe to this blessed mess if you're into it, and leave us a like, please, or rate, review, and subscribe.
And I'm your host, Bria, and it would be awesome for you to wipe off those buttery popcorn fingers and give us a review. Follow us at Roll Call Pod, that is ROLECALLPOD, on Instagram, TikTok, and my favorite, Twitter, because the Twitter streets are always calling me. And this has been another episode of
Roll Call!
Keeping that in. I'm pretty sure it's too tight together to cut out. And on that note, we out.
Bye!